Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I'm Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy joy. We just want to bring you joy. Joy! We have a awesome show planned for you. Kind of a little special version of Fearless at the Movies. I spent the weekend watching Netflix's documentary on Steve Air McNair, the former Tennessee Titans, Houston Oilers quarterback who was tragically murdered in 2009, July 4th, 2009. And Netflix did a documentary, The Untold Story, on Steve McNair. We wanted to examine it. Obviously, Fearless here, we're based here in Nashville, Tennessee. One of our producers, David Reed, obviously has grown up here, was in the media, in the sports talk radio in that time in 2009, and so knows this story intimately. Steve Kim and myself both watched the documentary. I've watched it twice. I was somewhat, I'll save that story for a little bit later in the show before I talk about my limited involvement in the story. But I remember at the time interviewing the Vincent Hill, who was a big key player in this documentary at the end of this documentary, who raised some very, very pertinent questions about what actually happened to Steve McNair. The murder of Steve McNair was pinned on his girlfriend, alleged girlfriend, Sahil Qasemi, I think is her last name. She called herself Jenny. She was a 20-year-old Iranian woman who they said shot Steve McNair 4 times and then shot herself once. It was a murder-suicide. The police announced this, I believe, on July the 7th or July the 8th, 3-4 days after the July 4th murder. They wrapped up the case. This documentary calls into question that conclusion, that pronouncement. I tend to, agree with the questions raised at the documentary. I think the documentary is worth watching, but I'm going to bring David Reed and Steve Kim into this conversation, and we'll start with David Reed. I found the documentary, Dave, incomplete. I can't believe the murder of a former NFL MVP, the murder of a guy that played in one of the most memorable playoff games and a very memorable Super Bowl, involved in the Music City Miracle, which eventually led to them finishing 1 yard short of a Super Bowl. Steve McNair's profile in the NFL is enormous. His profile in Nashville, enormous. And to think that you could cover this murder in 56 minutes, it'll say 58 minutes, but it wraps up 56 minutes in, I found that disappointing. So when they got to the end, I was like, oh, I can't wait for part 2 of this. And I was like, oh, this is it? So I enjoyed the documentary, but I was disappointed by the documentary.
Yeah, so I think I kind of landed on the same side because there was an SI podcast that was probably, at least 10 episodes, maybe an hour long each that covered it. That was the first in-depth coverage of it that it had, other than here locally in Nashville. The Tennessee had done some stuff. Some of the local television shows, television stations had done some documentaries based on it as well. So I was thinking that this was going to be at least a two-part series. So when it ended, I had the same exact thought, because I thought the way they spent time giving the backstory and kind of personalizing Steve wasn't necessary for me, but was probably necessary for the Netflix audience to some extent, because he did play here in Nashville. It was a small market team, still kind of a small market as far as media goes in the NFL market for Nashville and the Titans. So there was probably that need to personalize him to the audience to some extent and kind of really paint the picture to what he meant to Nashville and Middle Tennessee as the Titans were coming into town as a franchise. But when they spent so much time doing that with head coach Jeff Fisher, I thought, yeah, we're going to get into the meat and bones of the case. We're going to see some forensics. We're going to see some, crime scene diagrams. We're going to talk to some more, get more of the detective in the case, some more crime scene stuff going on, and it didn't really happen. And Vincent Hill has been such a critical figure in this case after it happened. I thought there was going to be much more of him. So introducing him so late in the documentary, I was looking for that part 2 of him saying everything he needs to say.
Vincent Hill, a critic of the conclusions that the Nashville Police Department reached. Do you remember in 2009, 10, 11, or any time interviewing Vincent Hill? Was he popular on the Nashville talk radio circuit?
I don't remember him because he was a former Nashville Police patrolman. Worked some narcotics, was never like full-time in narcotics, like went back to patrol, went on to become a private investigator. I don't ever remember hearing his name mentioned with this case until he started. I think he may have put out a book at some point. That's the first time I ever really remember hearing his name associated with the case. But look, I don't agree with his conclusions. I don't agree with your conclusions of there's this big grand conspiracy. No one has gained more out of this case than Vincent has, because he went from being a lowly patrol officer at Metro Nashville Police. Now he's on television talking crime every single day of the week. So he's had more to gain from professionally and financially from this case than anyone else.
Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Caleb Williams passing yards gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. My mom, she loves gambling and she loves sports. She sent me her picks for this NFL season. Myles Garrett, more than 14 sacks. Tyreek Hill, more than 100 pass receptions. Aaron Rodgers, more than 27 passing TDs. I like those picks, Mama. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code FEARLESS and get $50 off instantly when you play $5. That's code FEARLESS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, that's a good segue into Steve. Steve, I didn't buy the story they're telling here about Steve McNair. I really thought the documentary was incomplete. Did you buy the story?
I never really thought about it because I hadn't actually delved into the whole Vincent Hill thing. And I'm with you guys. I felt as though they left a lot of meat on the bone. And by the time it ended with the credits, I was still hungry. I was like, wait a minute, you're going to leave me on that? I just felt it was really interesting the way they just kind of wrapped it up in a bow. And they said, okay, join us for the Connor Stallions documentary. And I'm thinking to myself that if this was a 30 for 30 on ESPN, this would have been a full 2-hour episode or a 2-parter broken up into 1-hour segments. And they were really delved into Steve McNair, what he was, what he meant to Alcorn State, the national phenomenon, and then the actual case that took place. And guys, maybe it's just me. I wanted to hear from Steve McNair's wife. I thought that was a particularly glaring omission. Maybe she refused to do it. I didn't see the full credits. Maybe she declined. I can understand why. But I wanted to get her viewpoint on what was their personal relationship like. Were they actually going through a separation and a divorce? And what was her feelings on what took place? And outside of a few B-file or B-roll footage and pictures, she really wasn't involved in this particular documentary.
Yeah, to me, the documentary is an appetizer, and I'm talking about the lightest of appetizers.
Yeah.
It is. It was the lobster bisque, and it's like, hey man, bring out some red meat. Let's bring out some potatoes, and also a side of broccoli. I just because wrapping this up with Jeff Fisher basically arguing, hey man, I could raise some questions, but you know what? Just let it go. I was just like, well, hold on. There's no one that I love that would be murdered and I would go, I don't really want to get to the bottom of this. Let's let it go. That's where, that ending, when I found out that's the ending, that's the note we're going to end it on, Jeff Fisher just saying, let it go. That to me is where I go, oh, they wanted to go away because they're protecting Steve McNair more than they're protecting his potential killer.
Yeah, that was probably the most vocal I've heard Coach Fisher speak about Steve and the actual murder itself. Of course, he's talked about their relationship over the years after his death many times, but actually voicing the opinion that, yeah, I could ask these questions about the way that this was presented to us and the way that he died. I thought, oh, there's the hook. Here, more to come, episode 2, where's it at? And then it ends again. It left, and it's funny you brought up lobster bisque as an appetizer. I hate lobster bisque. I was just telling someone this other day, it's like fish flavored water. Like what is the purpose of lobster bisque? But I thought, there's the hook. Jeff is really he's gonna ask some of these questions, and that's gonna be the jumping off point for this next part of the documentary. And it just wasn't there.
Steve, are you as cynical as me that, hey man, I'm not buying that this 20-year-old girl did a murder-suicide? Vincent Hill, to me, couldn't have made a more obvious case. A guy that was convicted of murder, convicted of armed robbery. It was his gun. He's on the phone with her an hour and a half before her death. Hey, where are you at? It's his gun. And somehow I'm just supposed to believe she did it?
Well, Jason, just the fact that it turned out that they had more than just a passing relationship in terms of, here's a few bucks, here's a handgun, goodbye. This was not your average everyday eBay transaction. They had some sort of relationship, and I don't mean personal or sexual. It turns out as they went through the phone records, they had constant communications, right? And so here's the other thing that I thought was odd, where I do side with Vincent Hill. In an investigation of this manner, if you are caught lying the way he was, and he said, well, I had to say those things to this girl's right here, and I don't want to mess up my groove, isn't that a huge red flag? Perjuring yourself as a witness or a suspect under some sort of investigation or person of interest? I thought that was very, very strange. And then here's the thing. I don't want to make accusations of his ex-teammate that was in business with him in terms of the restaurant. We know how business relationships can go sideways with friends and family. The $13,000 check. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you sprung that on us a little bit late. It wasn't just about, hey, you gave a couple of drinks to those girls over there and you didn't charge them. It's $13,000. And look, back then, $13,000 is probably like, what, $35,000? It's obvious they went sideways. So that's another one I'm thinking, God, I don't want to accuse the guy, but I can't lie. It made me raise an eyebrow.
It's not just, okay, I don't want to accuse the guy, but his original statement of like, yeah, I was getting Steve into the business world. And then they show this picture of him in some kind of pimp hat or just all dressed up. And I'm like, well, hold on. What business world were you getting him into? This doesn't seem like, yeah, me and Steve were planning a trip to Wall Street to talk with some venture capitalists about X, Y, and Z. It's like this, and literally, I don't know what that gridiron restaurant is, but it looked like some kind of chicken shack. And it's just like, hold on, a multi-million-dollar quarterback who I looked up made somewhere in the NFL between 76 and 112 million dollars. And the business that he started was Steve McNair on a strip mall called Gridiron, where they looked like maybe probably sold some hot chicken, and Gaddy was the face of, I was moving Steve into the business world. And all I can think of, like, Gaddy, again, looks like he's similar to my age or somewhere in that range. And I'm like, college offensive lineman at Alcorn State. Rip me if you want, but I don't think he turned down Harvard to go to Alcorn State. And he was probably like me, marginal college student. And so, I'm getting Steve into the business world. That was just another red flag to me. And just like you said, 13,000 goes sideways. And then we haven't even, because I'm telling people, you got to watch this, because I've just never seen anything like this. White dude, Wayne McNeely or Wayne Neely or whatever.
Neely, yeah.
Wayne Neely. He shows up at the murder scene, doesn't call the police, calls Gaddy. It's an hour later. And then they got Neely on tape talking to the police, whipping out a wad of cash, saying, can I pay somebody? And I'm supposed to I'm not getting any of these questions answered. I'm just, whoa, what was Steve into? Who's this group of friends? And I'll even go back to, they started the documentary with Gaddy's phone call to the police. I didn't like the way that sounded. If I walk in and my friend is dead on a couch, I'm calling in such a panic and screaming and I didn't like the way that was unpacked. All of it was just red flags everywhere to me.
So I think when situations like this happen, and I think this is your fascination, my fascination with the JFK assassination over the years, because you had put JFK on one side and Lee Harvey Oswald on the other side of the scale, and it doesn't balance out, right? I think this is the same situation with Steve McNair and Jenny Cassimi. It just doesn't balance out for us on the surface level. So we want to dig deeper to find out how this lone gunman can kill the president of the United States, how this 20-year-old can kill an NFL quarterback. When we look at it on surface level, I think it just doesn't balance out for us. So I've known Robert Gaddy for a long time. I was the one guy who had season tickets to the Nashville Cats. I was that guy. Robert Gaddy was an arena football player. So that's how I originally knew Robert Gaddy. I didn't know for years that he blocked for Steve McNair in college. I never knew that. And he says in the documentary that everyone, they kind of acted like I was Steve's bodyguard. Gaddy acted like he was Steve's bodyguard. I don't think Steve acted like he was his bodyguard. So, but he is a classic coattail rider. He is one of those people who finds someone of fame and wealth that he knows and latches onto them. He had no motive whatsoever to have Steve McNair killed or be involved in it whatsoever, because that was going to hurt his pocketbook. Now, his pocketbook was hurt when he had this falling out with him over the $13,000. But a little bit on my background for people that don't know, I worked with Titans Radio for a number of years. So I used to travel with the team. I was one of the first people on the scene the day that he was murdered. I was supposed to, on July 4th, I was supposed to go down and host the big 4th of July ceremony downtown on the river for the city of Nashville. It's one of the biggest fireworks shows in the country. I was working for the country radio station at the time and also working for Titans Radio. As I was preparing to do the whole MC ceremonies, I was at the radio station leaving to go home. One of the things that Stephen McNair and I share in common, other than just phenomenal athletes, we both liked a good pregame nap. So I was leaving the radio station to go home and take a nap before I come back and did a whole 4th of July thing that day. And I got a phone call from someone that I knew that tipped me off that Steve McNair may have been involved in an incident. And the incident was right across, the condos where he was killed was right across the street from the radio station that I worked. So much so that they pulled surveillance video from the radio station to try to put together a timeline to see if they could see people coming and going from the condo on July 4th or the morning of July the 3rd. So no one. Gaddy really didn't have this whole thing, this blow up over $13,000. That's a lot of money to you and I. But I traveled with the Titans. I've seen Steve McNair walk into a hotel bar and buy full bottles of liquor off of the shelf and pay $500, $800 for them. That really was, in the grand scheme of things, that's not enough to murder someone of the stature of Steve McNair. So Gaddy as a suspect to me, even though this guy's very shady, like he visions himself the Suge Knight kind of Nashville and Music City. Like he has an inflated opinion of himself and wants to put himself out there to be more than he actually ever was. But there's no motive for Gaddy to be involved in this whatsoever. But the fact that he was so shady in that 911 call, if it were my friend, I'd probably have a much more visceral reaction than he had. And also in the documentary, there's a lot of huffing and puffing. There ain't no tears coming out of that man's eyes. His eyes are always a little red, if you know what I mean. Yep. There were no tears coming out of Big Daddy Gaddy's eyes, crying over Steve McNair, even all these years later.
Steve, I'm gonna let you jump back in if you have a thought on Gaddy, and then I'm gonna explain why I think he's more potentially harmful, dangerous than maybe Dave thinks.
Well, the only thing is, Jason, the reason why the phone call went the way it did, remember, he didn't actually walk in on the body first. I mean, he had time to prep himself. I just thought it was very strange that Neely, I don't know what role he played in Steve McNair's life, if he was a concierge or just a cleanup guy. He obviously has the shock. Protocol says at that point, when you see two dead bodies, blood all over, bullet casings, you have to call 911. I think that's what most people would do. But his first thought was to call Gaddy. Okay, I would love to know exactly what went on in that conversation. And then the decision was made an hour later, like, okay, let's call 911 now. I thought that was odd. Now, the more that I think about it, and being able to listen to Vincent Hill lay out what he thinks are some of the unanswered questions, I can't lie to you. It's very peculiar that, again, the person that walked in on Steve McNair passed away with another body is not 911. It's Gaddy. Odd.
So let's say you're Gaddy and you don't have any motive to kill Steve McNair. I will not disagree with that. I don't think Gaddy wanted Steve McNair dead or even killed Steve McNair. Is Gaddy foolish enough to unwittingly put Steve McNair in harm's way? Is his, hey, I'm doing business for Steve McNair. I need to fix this $13,000 problem I have with Steve McNair, and in trying to fix that, have I made associations with dangerous people who I've now brought into Steve McNair's life? So I think the guy's name's Adrian. I can't think of his last name.
Adrian Gilliam.
Adrian Gilliam, the guy that allegedly sold Jenny or Sahil the gun. He's been in jail for murder before, been in jail for armed robbery. He seemed to be some type of low-level drug dealer, criminal, whatever. And she called him Ben had big stacks. So he's getting cash some sort of way. Is that the type of guy that Gaddy could have brought into Steve's orbit in some inadvertent way and may have said, hey, Steve's got this cat house that he rents out and this is where so-and-so stays, just bragging, or, because what these guys a lot of say, they won't even say Steve McNair, this is a house we have for our side chicks and blah, blah, blah. And so now this guy perhaps knows where he lives. Maybe he's targeted this young girl that Steve McNair's maybe chasing around with 6 to 8 different other women. And this guy knows, oh, he's got a spare one over here that's got a house rented downtown. He starts flirting with her. I say all that to say, take someone like myself. If we dial the clock back 20 years, 25 years. I have been in relationships where a friend has connected me to someone who's, I didn't know their whole background. I didn't know what they were all off into. I'm going to try to unpack this as clearly as I can without, snitching or putting anyone in harm's way. But I think I've even shared the story. Like, you could find pictures of me on a New Year's Eve partying in Las Vegas on a double date with a guy who shot and killed someone in Las Vegas. And I didn't know what the guy was all off into. I came to be friends with him through a different avenue, through friends, and became friendly with him. And I think I've told the story about, Wet Republic, the pool at the MGM in Las Vegas. And I'm with the group of guys that I didn't know all their backgrounds, and someone brought trouble to our cabana, and these guys wiped the floor with them instantly. And I'm sitting there like, holy cow, if someone had gotten hurt, this was Jason Whitlock's cabana, and when they start doing the background checks on the people that I'm with, it's a bad look for me. And so that's where I'm saying, do I think Gaddy wanted Steve McNair killed? No. Do I think Gaddy's an idiot and that he could have brought people into Steve's circle? And do I think that potentially Gaddy, knowing like, okay, I didn't do this, but I'm connected to Adrian Gillum or whoever did this, and I need time to clean up anything inside this place that will make them start questioning me and my relationship with this person or that person. And then, Dave, this is something I think you can speak more clearly to than Steve and I is, I think Steve McNair was such an enormous icon here in Nashville. When I look at that lead detective, Charles Robinson, who is not Bunk Moreland from The Wire, in my opinion. This seemed like just a good old boy that somehow is the detective here in Nashville. I could see him like, man, if we go all the way down this rabbit hole, this is gonna be a bad look for Steve. And we just need to wrap this up, blame it on this girl, and keep it moving.
So I love a good conspiracy.
Yeah.
But I'm what I refer to as a conspiracy realist. I'm an Occam's razor guy. And in this situation, I think this is a 20-year-old girl who thought she had it made, and all of a sudden that was being taken away from her, and she went crazy and killed Steve McNair. That's what I believe. But to your point, in a city full of country music superstars, Steve McNair was a rock star. He was the first big-time celebrity in this city. Growing up here, you could go out to dinner and see a country music star at Cracker Barrel. It was no big deal. But when the NFL come to town and Steve McNair came to prominence and that team went to the Super Bowl that first year, there was no bigger celebrity in this town than Steve McNair. So if you're telling me that the police went out of their way to try to cover up something for someone in this town, if they were going to do that, he would be at the top of the list. I believe they would do that before. He'd had a prior run-in a couple years earlier, maybe 5 or 6 years earlier with a DUI. They'd just come off the incident a couple days earlier, I believe on July 2nd, where she's pulled over for DUI. He's in the car with her. And that whole situation, I think, precipitated what led to his murder. But yes, if you were to tell me that the police may have brushed something under the rug, or that they may have wanted this to go away as quickly as possible to protect the reputation of Steve McNair, because look, there were rumors, not widespread rumors. I don't think the average Titans fan on the street would know that Steve McNair had a reputation as a womanizer, that he had relationships outside of his marriage. But people who were close to them, people who were in the sports media, they knew that this was going on. I think there were people who went out of his way to try to protect his reputation for him. So when this all came out that she was there, they were having relationships, and I saw the photos of them being photoed out in public together, like there's a TMZ photos of them parasailing somewhere or on the beach somewhere. That was as shocking to me as the fact that he was murdered, because we knew that he was having extramarital affairs, but he was never out with them. He was never seen out in public with them. There was never photos of them. So when that came out, I was like, oh, this is something a little bit different. So that's what leads me to believe that he and Michelle were having problems, that they were probably on the road to a separation or on the road to a divorce, because I don't think he would have been seen out in public with someone other than his wife, because up until that point, he had went out of his way to present himself as he was presented to the public, as this great hard-nosed football player who had this family, and it was the American dream, because that's what he was such a rock star in this town, because he fit Middle Tennessee. He fit the Nashville area. He was a country boy from out in nowhere who fought hard. He was a hard-nosed football player. Like, he played football the way I played football. Like, he was Randall Cunningham at 250, 260 pounds or whatever. You know, this rare speed and strength and agility and just hard-nosed. I will never forget the 99 season. He goes away, has back surgery. His first game back from back surgery, he's diving over against the Pittsburgh Steelers of all teams, diving, sacrificing his body to score the winning touchdown 3 weeks after he having back surgery. Like, that was what endeared him to the Titans fans and the football fans here in Nashville. So that was the reputation that he had. And I took a lot of slack, because I was one of the first people in the media in this town to kind of call out, like, hey, this is the problem with this idolatry that we talk about all the time, placing these people up on the shelves, because he was this guy that we all saw on Sundays and looked up to and admired, but the life that he was living behind the scenes was less than ideal. And there were teammates to this day that will not have a relationship or a conversation with me because I was outspoken about the way that he died, because when he passed away the way he did, so many of the great memories that I had of him on the football field just faded away because of the way that he passed away.
Gentlemen, do I have an opportunity for you? Allie Beth Stuckey is leading an event that will inspire your woman. You're not going to want them to miss out on what's going to transpire in Dallas on September 28th. Share the Arrows, a day dedicated to equipping women with the clarity and courage to navigate today's world with conviction and grace. This isn't just any event. It's a chance to come together with fellow women who are ready to stand firm in truth and fellowship. It will be led by Allie Beth Stuckey, an incredible list of speakers, including Rosanna Butterfield, Alicia Childers, Abby Halberstadt, plus there will be music of Francesca Battistelli. This event is made possible with the generous support of Carly Jean Los Angeles, a brand that aligns with our values of truth and faith. Help all the God-fearing women in your life experience powerful teaching, encouraging fellowship, and inspiring worship by attending this amazing event. Go to sharethearrows.com today and select from the following packages: general admission, the breakfast package, the VIP package, and the premium all access package. That's sharethearrows.com. Go there today. Dave, help me understand, what would the motivation be? Let's say the police are 1,000% right. Sahil Kazemi did the murder. Her mom was murdered, I think, in Iran. She had no real American family here. So she's dead. So why do they have to come out 3-4 days later and say, she did it, we know exactly who did it? Who gets harmed if they say, we think she did it, but we're going to do some more investigating and get to the full bottom of this? I just don't understand the rush to, yep, it's this 20-year-old girl. We don't need to ask any more questions. He's killed on July 4th. They have a 7-minute conversation on July 5th with the guy whose gun it was. A 7-minute. They didn't even find out that he had been in prison for murder and these other things. It all just seems rushed and microwaved. And I'm like, to what end? Who were they protecting? The dead 20-year-old Iranian girl with no family really over here in America? Or were they just trying to let's put a story out, let's put it to bed, and let's protect Steve's reputation, let's protect his wife, let's protect his family. Let's not, and that's what I felt like I heard from Jeff Fisher, is just like, guys, you think you want to know, you think you want to get to the bottom of this, but you really don't. Let's just let it go. That's what really raises the red flags to me. It's just, again, you can't handle the truth.
Yeah, but to that end, I believe we live in a society who we kind of expect someone of Steve McNair's stature and fame and fortune to be like, oh yeah, of course he was having an affair. And sometimes this is a consequence of what happens. That's easier to sell to the public than, let's go further down this road. What was her relationship with this Adrian Gilliam guy?
Yeah.
Because we don't really know. There's a lot more to that story than we have been told. What if he was in some form or fashion more connected to Steve McNair than we're being led to believe? What if Steve did have a problem other than women and alcohol, and this Adrian Gilliam guy was involved in that? That would be the reason to say, oh, we have two dead people here. Here's the gun. Here's this relationship that he had with this girl, and it's troubled. Yep, this is what happened. She did it. End of story. That would be the reason to just go ahead and wrap it up within 3 days and try to sweep it under the rug. So, I mean, look, as much as I believe she did it, and the stories can be as simple as she thought she had it made. She thought she was going to marry Steve McNair. And then all of a sudden she finds that, oh, he's got all these other girls, that she wasn't the only one. And now he's cut her off financially. He's not responding to her in text. He's leaving her on the hook for this DUI that's coming up. She thinks her life is falling apart. That's a very simple explanation for it all to me. But I see the unanswered questions. So when you come to me and say, what's up with this Gilliam guy? Look at this detective. He looks like somebody who was probably a Titans fan, probably had Titans season tickets. I know there were plenty of people in the upper management of the Metropolitan Police Department who were huge Titans fans and who had access to the team like the average fan wouldn't. So there are questions that I think you can answer, but I also think it can be as simple as his crazy ex-girlfriend.
Steve, here's the other thing that just a red flag to me is, their argument in that documentary was she got a DUI at midnight, and 90 minutes later, she's buying a gun from Adrian Gilliam. And she's decided to end her life. They play the clip of her and Steve McNair talking after she gets the DUI. That didn't sound like a guy that was giving up on her. That sounded like a guy that wanted her to follow some instructions and not dirty up his name. And I just don't, I don't buy the story. Steve?
Yeah, I thought that was strange. I thought when they say, hey, you get one phone call, maybe I've watched too much Perry Mason or Columbo. Didn't you go out to the payphone and stick 50 cents in and call someone else? I didn't know the police actually dialed up the number, then put Steve McNair on a speakerphone while in the car. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to watch more Law and Order, I guess. But here's the thing to Dave's point. I think Dave has a great point, and it's very uncomfortable for the public and the athletes themselves. When they say we're more than an athlete, I always respond, you're lucky we only look at you as an athlete. Because the bottom line is, and I am not being judgmental, we are all sinners, as you like to say, Jason. We should only go out there and admire these men who do great things athletically for their exploits on the playing field. Because as you peel back the onion and the layers, we find out, just like us, they're all flawed individuals, and we don't want to know about them. I've always said, admire the athlete, do not worship the person. Okay? And that's the thing. Like with Steve McNair, I do not judge. My viewpoint of him has not changed because I understand, being around athletics, that, hey, they are not the people that they portrayed on the United Way commercial for years in the National Football League. I understand that these are flawed individuals with prodigious gifts. They've been gifted by God, but that does not make them people that we should necessarily worship or look up to. And to end this right here is that you're right. Maybe if there was something more sinister, and I still kind of believe it was the girl. I think that she was a groupie that thought she had won the lottery. Then all of a sudden, her mind was boggled when the cash line of credit dried up, that she got very, very desperate. But to your point, yes, I believe if there was something more violent or vicious, the story of the girl being reacting to unrequited love, I think that is the lesser of two evils.
And one thing that always stood out to me about that phone call is the way that it ended. She thought she was going to make that phone call and he was going to show up riding a white horse and save her from that situation. But the last words that were said in there was, "Okay, baby, I love you." And Steve says, "All right."
All right.
I heard that. He's not going to, I heard that. He's not going to say anything that can and will be used him in divorce court.
Yeah.
And he's not going to do that. And this is for both of you. We'll start with Steve, but Dave, you'll have the expertise. Steve, could you imagine trying to be a local Tennessee journalist, let's say for the Tennessean, who decided, you know what, I'm going to get to the bottom of this Steve McNair deal, and I'm going to go out and report this story all the way out, and then I'm going to continue to live here in Nashville. And I just don't think most people have the stomach for that, and I don't even know if the newspaper has the stomach for it or would even allow it. And that's kind of where we are with journalism, even going back to 2009 and 2010. No one wants to be the journalist who perhaps has to write the very uncomfortable story of like, man, here's how dysfunctional and out of control Steve McNair's personal life was, and it led to X, Y, and Z. I just don't think journalists have the heart for that, and neither do the institutions backing them.
Yeah, I would, if let's say you were a young reporter or an established columnist and your editor said, "Hey, do you want this assignment?" I think most, including maybe even me, I'd be like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm good. I'd like to remember Steve McNair for the way he was." And look, the public with the worship they have of athletes and teams, and Steve McNair, as Dave said, was the first iconic Tennessee Titan, probably alongside Eddie George. He meant a lot to the city and symbolically to a lot of people, given his role as a black quarterback. One thing that I've really learned in the last 5-6 years with the mainstream media and the American public, they love narratives. They love narratives that fit and that are convenient. And look, there's that old saying about don't speak ill of the dead. I think there's a lot of that sentiment too. And I would argue, and Dave can say more than I can, he lives in Nashville, I would say that the impact that McNair had on the city with the contributions he made as a football player and probably charitably and how he made people feel, I would say regardless of whatever errors that he made, and again, none of us are perfect, it was actually that Steve McNair was a net positive for the city of Nashville and the state of Tennessee.
Dave, before you hop in, 'cause Steve, I'm going to let you go unless I will give you a chance. Is there something we haven't covered that maybe you wanted to sneak in before you got out of here?
Yeah, well, when you related the story back to yourself, I thought, well, wait a minute, did Jason also have a cat house? And it just kind of reminded me of Michael Irvin speaking about the White House, which was right outside the Dallas Cowboys practice field. I know all about that. I know some people that were involved, and it just reminded me of that great line from Michael Irvin about that when he told Jerry Jones he had to fess up, and he said, "Jerry, we tried to do the wrong thing the right way." And even Jerry Jones said, "Thank you for your honesty, Michael." That's all I have to say.
And let me say, I have on multiple occasions tried to do the wrong thing the right way. And
haven't we all? Haven't we all?
Yeah, I once shared an apartment in Vegas, or living in LA, had an apartment in Vegas with a girl that danced at Spearmint Rhino. So yeah, I know. And again, that's how you end up in a room filled with cocaine and ecstasy, and you're like, how did I get here? trying to do the wrong thing the right
calling
way.
that Michael Irvin calling that the White House had nothing to do with the color of the paint on the outside of it.
Yeah. White House.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Steve. But not done yet because I want to ask Dave the question about could someone in the media? Because see, I would be I would want to tell this story, and it's not. I would love Steve McNair. Probably the Derek Thomas of Kansas City or the Derek Thomas of Nashville. Same related. Love Derek Thomas, but I would want to tell the truth of the story because I think it's important for people to understand it. Because again, it's another why we shouldn't have these idols, and so I think Steve McNair. Very capable of making all the same mistakes that I've made, and even bigger ones than I've made, and that's where my suspicions go. Is like he got himself into some real trouble, and there's even a more innocent explanation of because he's dating some loose woman who he's put up in an apartment. There's a good chance he just showed up there and this dude was there handling his business, he thought, and Steve McNair may have confronted this guy. I'm paying for this place. This is and they may have had an argument, and next thing you know, Steve McNair is dealing with some ghetto guy that, carries it. It could be that, but I do think that, but anyway, could someone here locally have told that story and survived?
No. And also to that point, there were and to all my friends in the media at the time and even now, I love most of you guys, but there were no Jason Whitlocks in this town to do that. There was no one who was going to be brave enough or fearless enough to go out and try to see where the holes in the story really were and if they could be filled in with something else. No one was going to do that because when the Titans came to town, it was such a cash cow for the media, for the businesses around the new stadium, for radio. The sports talk radio in this town really began when the Titans moved to town. It's still one of the most popular formats in this town is sports talk radio, and that would not have happened, of course, if the Titans had to come to town. And Steve McNair was the flag bearer for the Tennessee Titans. And there are still players from that 99 team who were ancillary contributors who are still living on the fame of that 99 season and that Super Bowl run. But no, there was no one in the media at the time who was going to go out and try to find if there was more to that story because it would have been career suicide. People don't like the truth. And I think that was even... it's more so the case now, but even back then, no one was going to go out once the cops said wiped their hands up and said, cut and dry case, murder, suicide. He had this relationship that went sideways, but there's still so many questions. Like, I don't believe she had a key to that place. He wasn't crazy enough to give this woman a key to that place. She got in somehow. How did she get in?
She didn't have a key to that place?
There's no way he gave her a key to that place, no. It's my understanding that Neely had a key to the place. Steve, of course, had a key to the place. There were other players.
That was not where she was living?
No, she was not living there, no. This was strictly a crash pad for Neely, Steve, and some other associates of Steve. She did not have a key to that place. She got into that place somehow. I mean, did they meet up there? I'm assuming they've met up there at some point. Someone had to let her in. And another question, they say that it was likely he was asleep when that happened. Well, he'd been ignoring this girl for 2 days. I don't think he's going to invite her over and fall asleep on the couch and open himself up to something like that. So it's questions like that. I still believe that she's the one solely responsible for it, but there's still so many questions. And this documentary, to me, left more on the bone than it really answered. So you need to go watch it if you're a sports fan, if you're interested in the case whatsoever, but don't think you're going to leave there satiated based on the 56 minutes of this documentary.
I'm going to say something that some of the audience won't, it may be too much for them. But now that you're telling me that, because for some reason I thought it was his place and maybe he lent it out to this person, but it makes more sense what you're telling me, and it jogs my memory of what I remember thinking in 2009, 2010, and just even watching the documentary. And so there's a mentality among NFL players, professional athletes, and this was particularly true during that time. It's that whole Snoop Dogg. It ain't no fun unless my homies can have some. Mm-hmm. And so the reason he didn't tell that girl he loves her is because he doesn't love her. It's not his wife. And so he does it when he's done with her, particularly, and maybe not even done with her, but he could care less if Gaddy, Neely, whoever else had access to her sexually. I've seen this a million times. It's a pervasive mentality. My wife is off limits. Anything else that I'm doing, hey fellas, it's all in the game. That's the mentality. And so there's a lot to this story. Do you think there's an audience, and I know you said Sports Illustrated has done something, is there an audience for this story even still now today? Because it's no different than how Serial took off, the Serial podcast about the murder in Baltimore or whatever. I forget the site, what the guy's name is. Anyway, Serial podcast. But it seems like someone could pick up this story now and still ask, who is Adrian Gillum still alive?
Yeah, I think he served time in prison for being a felon in possession of a firearm, for admitting that he had the gun that he sold to her. So he went to prison after that. As far as I know, he's still alive. He's still around. Of course, Gaddy is still around. I think he's running a restaurant, another restaurant.
He's still in Nashville?
Here in Nashville. Yeah, he's still in Nashville. So him being the Suge Knight of Music City, I'm trying to be careful what I say. But I think there's definitely an appetite for it, because in the process of moving, I hired some movers to come get some heavy stuff over at my house, and they saw some of the memorabilia laying around and asked me, so who's the sports fan in the house? And I didn't tell them my whole background in sports and sports media. And they brought up this documentary before I'd even saw it. And we talked about it for 20 minutes. And these are two young guys who were hearing the story for the first time. Their first time knowing anything about it was watching that documentary. So yeah, I think there's definitely an appetite for it. And I think it's still a story that needs to be told, because at the end of the day, it's a cautionary tale. We talked about Cam Newton earlier this week. All these different women, all these different babies. Steve McNair, 4 kids, 3 women, which is something that is never really even talked about. It wasn't talked about at the time when Steve McNair was at the height of his fame here in Nashville. So this is a cautionary tale about what happens when you're living that type of lifestyle. And I thought it then, and I still think it now, his kids were as much of a victim of this as himself and Jenny were, because they ended up growing up with, his 2 kids with Michelle, ended up growing up without a dad at all in their lives. The 2 younger kids, I don't know to what extent he was involved with them anyway, but they were as much victims in this as anyone else. So this, at the heart of it, it's a Greek tragedy. It's a cautionary tale for other people in his position, other athletes in his position nowadays.
I'm going to try to reach back out to Vincent Hill, see if we can get him on the show again to because I was in Kansas City, I think, still at the time, and we had him on the radio, or maybe I had him on my podcast. I can't remember, but I've engaged with him before about this topic and would love to do so again. I thank you guys for watching. Hey, don't forget, we're going live starting September 9th, 10 a.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. Fearless Live, only on YouTube and at blazetv. We'll play some tomorrow, and we'll see you next time.
Waiting for the countdown, coming off the breakdown, standing in line for freedom. Looking for a breakout, feeling like a standoff, nothing in life like freedom. Came in like a fighter, striking like a ladder, making all these moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. free. I just